you doing?
Good, how are you?
Excellent.
Nice to see you in person. Ooh, lots of points.
So these, for anyone to ask questions.
Okay, just throw it at them?
Yeah, definitely throw it at them. And then
100 or
send them
75?
over to the front desk, and they'll get a free shirt.
Sweet.
Yeah, if they go over to the other desk, they're not going to get a free shirt. Just leave.
I want a shirt.
Just give me.
And Frankie, if you can grab a picture.
Yeah.
Well, in the middle. Are we good?
Yeah.
Hello. Test. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right, we're good, Frankie? All right. Hey, everybody. My name's David Stamen, and today we are going to talk about lifecycle management in AVS through kind of some API-first commands. I was supposed to be here with one of my colleagues, Kyle. Unfortunately, he is stuck on an airplane further from home than where he started. So that's always fun. So he'll be here like 5 o'clock. I really love doing these sessions, and let's see if my clicker is gonna go. There we go. About me, I'm the Director of Technical Strategy for Virtualization and Cloud at Pure Storage. I took my Pure hat off, so I'm not wearing that right now. But lots of experience all over. As everybody, I had a VMware tattoo. I worked there for a couple of years. I'm a vExpert, a code coach, an AWS community builder, and an ex-vMug leader. I'm home at Orlando, Florida. You can always connect with me on my blog as well as LinkedIn. So kind of a quick introduction. We're going to talk about something called run command with Azure. And we're really going to focus on kind of why this is important. And for some people, we may not even know what AVS is, and I'll kind of set a quick primer there. And then we'll jump into some of the challenges that we've seen with run command and kind of how at least we got around it at a Pure Storage perspective to really build a wrap around it and how we continue to innovate around that. If you're not familiar with Azure VMware Solution, it's Azure's VMware Solution. So it's really in their environment within the walls of their own data center, a little bit different than VMware Cloud on AWS. But some of the key components here is that it's deployed in a customer's Azure subscription in an Azure resource group that's dedicated with all these components. And here is going to be the core solution that includes vCenter, includes your hosts, includes your virtual machines and HCX. And one of the benefits there is you actually can tie now into external solutions such as SRM, Zerto, and Jetstream, but you can also tie into external storage. So Pure Storage went GA with our solution back in about March. And to do this, we actually had to co-develop a bunch of stuff with Microsoft to actually make this work. And I'll kind of tackle why we actually had to do that. The first thing is with run command. When you have a vCenter environment in Azure VMware Solution, unfortunately, you don't get an administrator at vSphere.local account. They give you an account called Cloud Admin. Cloud Admin has privileged set of rules of what you can actually do. So a lot of the standard administration tasks that you're familiar with, such as creating data stores, deleting things, creating things, you actually do not have the ability. One of the best parts about AVS is it's kind of bundled, it's VCF-like, but it's limited to what you can actually modify. In order to do that, there's something called run command. Run command exists for a lot of Azure features, but for AVS, it's really the biggest built-out solution from there. And by being able to do that, it lets you modify kind of 4 key areas. The identity to tie in external identity solutions, storage, which is where we'll focus on today, disaster recovery, as well as VMware HCX. So when you think about the storage-related run commands, by default, AVS comes with vSAN storage, which is all HCI driven. But it does have support with other vendors for external file, but also we brought support for external block. And so with this, we brought in a whole bunch of components during preview. But one of the things that Microsoft wanted to do is that they didn't want all of these things exposed to end users once the solutions went generally available. And so where 14 were previously exposed, they went down to 5. And doesn't mean that they disappeared. They just hid them from the UI, and you had to do things behind the scenes for those. And really now, all of these are behind a feature flag. So all of those previous run commands that you would traditionally utilize to do things, you actually couldn't. But there was also another fundamental challenge of those run commands. They were very verbose, and they were inputs you may not needed the answer to. So for example, we were creating a VMFS data store. And as we know, there's steps that you have to add volumes to host groups. You need to rescan that cluster. You then need to mount that data store and then rescan it again. And from here, you would need to specify the cluster name. As well as the size, and again, run all. But there may not be things that you actually know the answer to, and a lot of these are actually done ad hoc tasks. So there's a couple of ways to approach the problem to simplify that. You can build a wrapper, a script, or a module. By doing that, you can now integrate into other PowerShell modules to feed in that data. But also what it really allows you to do is then integrate into other Azure native functions to build a desired state. Because while these things can be easily done, things can become out of sync very quickly. And we'll kind of run through some of the examples of what we actually did. So how we actually tackled this problem is we built a module up here called purestorage.cbs.avs. We actually ship an OVA that has all the components installed, so it's really good to go. But it really allows a good way to securely share data and do it in an organized format. Spoiler alert, 4 years in a row, I have a session on how to build and publish a module. I think that session's tomorrow. I actually changed it up this year. So I'll actually do something with Azure Artifacts. But really cool ways to actually tie into that of how we can actually bring that together. Within our function, we wanted to really define what we could do for our customers. There's a few ones that we've really focused on. The first one is being able to build a cluster out. What that does is enables MPIO on the host, enables all the VM kernel adapters, will actually configure the storage on our array. So it's actually running probably a script behind the scenes that probably has 1,000 lines of codes, but all we do is ask the customer for their array and the volume name, and it does everything else for it. One of the problems with that script is that Azure, and I think I probably might be jumping ahead, doesn't just upgrade hosts. If anything has a problem, they replace a host, which means that when that host is replaced, it's no longer in that desired state. And so by doing that, we actually utilized Azure Functions to maintain that desired state. So we actually deploy an AVS monitor as well as a capacity monitor that will actually pull the AVS environment for changes and then actually execute that script behind the scenes. And so there's a couple things we can do with that. So when we run that build CBS cluster, again, like I said, it runs a whole bunch of stuff. It'll enable MPIO, it'll build all the hosts, it configures the iSCSI targets. But again, when Microsoft replaced that host, all of that configuration goes away. And again, if you're using external storage, you want to make sure that all of your additional hosts are configured for that external storage. So that's, again, disaggregating that is that key point. So again, the problem here is that Azure just replaced that host and it gets out of that desired state. So by using an Azure function, we have the ability to tie in 2 discrete components, the AVS SDDC, as well as Cloud Block Store. And it uses App Insights and a function. And so again, it's polling for all of those changes. And when it detects that change, it can do that. And so one of the things we can actually do with those Azure functions, even in your own environment, is you can use it for external monitoring. Maybe you're relying on vSphere HA to detect when a VM becomes unresponsive and it needs to reboot that VM. There's ways to do that, to cycle an entire application instead of that individual VM. But we'll kind of jump into here to a quick demo. And I'll see, nope, it's not going to do that. I have to click the play button. Of what it actually looks like to handle that. So this is about 2 minutes. Maximize. Nope, it's only going to maximize in that section. So again, we have an AVS environment. As I mentioned, we have an OVA that we'll run into that to actually look at the commandlets. So we're looking at the commandlets for our module. And again, best part about modules, you can always update things because again, cloud is always changing. They've updated their versions, which broke our module. We're able to ship that out very quick. So to deploy an AVS monitor, we'll specify a cloud, the resource group, and Azure functions actually require a net new subnet. And so we'll do that. And then we're also passing in an endpoint and credentials. So as we build in that Azure function, we're actually parameterizing all of those components to be able to deliver that. Because again, one of the functions is you can't use existing networks, you have to build upon that. We'll go a little bit faster here in a moment. So we'll put in our credentials. And then really in here, it deploys all of the monitoring infrastructure, which is going to be in place here. See all the core components. And then once that's done, we actually can go into the Azure VMware Solution, review our function. And one of the best parts too is you can actually review the history of how often it was actually running, because one of these things, it runs behind the scenes. You can generate alerts to notify you when things run. But again, it's always good to know that it is enabled, it is running, and it is actually working. So this was one of the first problems that we had to tackle. But again, one of the other fundamental issues is what everybody always likes to happen is what happens when you run out of capacity. How do you grow that? So with our solution, we don't deploy all your storage up front because we want it to be seamless. And so similar to what we're doing with the Azure function, instead of polling the Azure SDDC, we're now polling our array. And so you can set a predefined threshold, so say 80%, that when your array gets 80%, it automatically grows it for you. And so what that does is it increases the capacity for you. And instead of having to worry about running out of space, which in some cases happens, it has the ability to execute that, essentially doubling the overall capacity, and then you're there. So I know one of the best things is doing something with like if this then that. Instead of getting your array filled up on a weekend and having to jump in and do it, it'll auto grow for itself, send you an email that it did it, and then on Monday you can go ahead and check what actually happened. And again, there's all types of thresholds that you can actually build within that. And I think I talked a little bit quick, but those are some of the core components. From an API perspective, there's really a whole lot of stuff you can do. All these things can be driven through APIs, through the PowerShell commandlets, through the Azure CLI, through the functions. And so really a lot of cool things that you can do with that. So any questions or comments? Anyone doing any fun projects with Run Command or other Azure-driven APIs? Cool. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. Oh yeah, one last thing. I did have some references on some of the core components to learn more about AVS, Run Command, as well as some of the technical documentation on our solutions.